Hey everybody, let's catch up on some Forza news. We've got a lot to talk about today. Of course, the Xbox Games Showcase was on Sunday, and there were a few sneaky reveals in some of the footage, and then the following blog post there. And then today, in the Forza Monthly, we got a bit of a deeper look into the new Forza Motorsports campaign. And yesterday, I was actually fortunate enough to join a handful of other creators and community members in a Q&A session with Chris Asaki and Dan Greenewalt about Motorsport's new single-player career. This video is probably just going to end up being a big info dump without a lot of flow or structure to it, so let's just kind of start in chronological order here and talk about everything revealed during the Xbox Showcase this past Sunday. First things first, the release date. Forza Motorsport is dropping October 10th, 2023, with a 5-day early access period for people who purchased the premium edition of the game, and we'll cover more on that in a bit. Now, their segment during the show was pretty short. They announced well before the show that this would most likely just be a glimpse at Motorsport's cover cars, and on the surface, there wasn't too much more to it than that, but if we slow things down just a bit, they did actually sneak in a few good bits of info here. Like, for example, in the new Car Upgrades UI, this Place in Car Bay option, which is clearly different to the Forza Vista mode you can likely access by clicking View Car. If we compare that to the home window we caught a glimpse of in the trailer as well, you can see a few cars in the background. And I can say that this has been confirmed from the QA session that you can manually select up to 4 of your cars to be displayed in these bays. I love stuff like this. I still think I would like to see more of it, something maybe akin to PGR's garage system perhaps, but maybe we can still get some different backdrops here to display our cars in. I think that'd be a nice little touch. Now, if we bring it back again to the upgrades menu, there is a bit more to point out here. We do see a pretty familiar upgrade system. As much as I was hoping for some change-ups here with lots of new categories of parts and new options, we are still getting pretty much the same standard, street, sport, and race options for really all the same parts we already have had. We do know that ballast will be an option now, but it seems that it will not be as adjustable as we've seen in games like Gran Turismo, and instead will just give us a few 100-pound increments to swap between. We also see the PI system return, and this was brought up during the Q&A session where they did say the PI system works well in the new Motorsport, and I think we'll just have to hold judgment on that. I don't have really any inherent issues with the PI system as a concept. It just tends to be fairly inaccurate in practice once people figure out how to min-max and build around it. Finally, here in this menu, we also see a car level. The E-Ray here is level 50, and this is actually something pretty interesting that we got a lot more info on through the Q&A session and Forza Monthly. The new Forza Motorsport no longer uses credits to buy car parts. Instead, car parts are now unlocked by leveling up the car and spending car points to purchase parts. This is going to mean that you can no longer just amass tons of credits and use them to build whatever you want without any restriction or concern for cost, which is a huge shakeup from previous games and honestly something I don't know if I like or not. I mean, I love having more progression, and I think this is a direct answer to that. But sometimes, especially late game, I do just want to build a car with full freedom or just experiment with some stuff without having to grind anything or spend time leveling something up, and I'm really curious where that balance is going to lie in the full game. Chris did answer a bit about this by saying that most everything will be unlocked by around level 30 or so, with things like engine and drivetrain swaps coming last, and when you unlock something, it's the full category. So for example, you don't just unlock street exhausts, you unlock all the exhaust options with a level up. He also clarified that to hit that level 30 mark, it should take about an hour per car depending on your skill level, and it'll be about 2 to 3 hours to hit the max level of 50. This is, again, something I just genuinely don't know if I'm gonna like or not. I think for the single player campaign, it could feel really good, encouraging us to focus more on one car and learning it upgrade by upgrade, with these decisions being a lot more impactful. but it was clarified that this system actually carries over into the entire rest of the game. So rivals and multiplayer will both still use the car leveling and car point system, meaning that you are likely going to have to spend some time, especially earlier in the game, grinding car levels to make sure you have the right cars and upgrades to compete in certain online events or do custom things with your friends. And for me, I'm a bit nervous that it's going to end up feeling more like a roadblock there instead of a fun progression system. Now, moving on, there isn't too much else to talk about here surrounding the Xbox showcase itself, but alongside that reveal, we also got a Steam and Microsoft store page for the game, and a couple blog posts that shared more. So let's take a minute here to look at those. For starters, we've got prices, and Motorsport in the US will be a $70 game for the base edition, with a $90 deluxe edition that includes the 30 vehicle car pass, and then there is also a $100 premium edition that includes the car pass, 8 vehicle race day car pack, VIP membership for double credits in game, the Welcome Pack, which gives 5 immediate car unlocks and some bonus credits, and of course the early game access, launching instead on October 5th. So the deluxe edition definitely feels like the weird middle child here. I would definitely recommend that people either just grab this one on Game Pass, which it will be on day one, or if you're a more diehard fan, just go straight for the premium edition. Just remember, no pre-orders. Now, moving over to the official blog post we got Sunday, there is something I want to point out here that really hasn't been talked about at all yet. And it's something that has me more curious and excited than almost any other media I've seen about the game. I'll read the quote here about Motorsport's multiplayer. Online racing is safer, more fun, and more competitive with AI-powered Forza race regulations, tire and fuel strategy, and new driver and safety ratings. This is really interesting. AI-powered race regulations mean that we could end up with a really good penalty system if the AI is able to properly learn who's at fault during an incident. I can only hope that this means the FRR evolves and adapts over time to get more and more accurate, presumably with the huge amount of data it will have to work with, and I'm sure some human intervention as well. This will then, of course, also lead into the driver and safety rating system, which again is really exciting. It's nothing new to Sims. Games like GT and iRacing have these, but it's great to see Motorsport working on them too. And again, I can only hope that these systems do their job well by placing drivers into online lobbies with other competitors of a similar skill level. That's what makes for good online racing, and it all hinges on these few features they just teased. Now, further down in the blog post, they reconfirm some of the tracks and cars we'll see in the game, so I'll throw that on screen here, of course, alongside a couple extras that have been teased or picked up on by fans. But we're not done yet here, as we also got a support update with a little Q&A section. The standouts here for me are, first, that the game won't have loot boxes. That alone is not a huge surprise, but I can further confirm that Chris and Dan assured us in the private Q&A that there will be no random drops at all in Motorsport. So no wheel spins or mod cards or anything goofy like that. The cars you unlock will be earned, and that's great to hear. In another question, pit crews are asked about, and we kind of saw a tease of this in some of the footage, but the answer they give us is a bit cryptic. They say that pit crews primarily show up in the featured multiplayer mode, so at least I really do hope we get pit crew animations in multiplayer. And then finally, perhaps not too surprisingly, when asked about VR, they say they have nothing to share at this time. They at least addressed it, and it's not a no, but this is what I like to call a PR no. So I'm definitely still not getting my hopes up. Alright, and that just about covers everything from the Sunday showcase and what they posted online afterwards. Now let's talk a bit more about what we saw today in the Forza Monthly and what I learned in the private Q&A session. First off, keep in mind that everything here is really focused around the single-player career. They said they'd be diving into multiplayer later in the summer, so definitely keep an eye out for that. Now for Motorsport's campaign, they're calling this the Builders Cup. Right away, this might look familiar to some other sim racing campaigns where you've got these themed racing series, but there is actually quite a lot that's new here, and some of it I'm pretty excited about. Before we jump in, I do want to state that these series are actually going to change and grow over time, with, as Chris Isaki said, new cars and tracks being released as rewards directly into the Builders Cup. And I'd love to see this updated regularly. Now, for how these work, basically each series will involve you focusing in on one car, and then practicing, building, and racing that car throughout the rest of the series. As you progress through the races in many of these series, the PI limits will go up, so you can start in a stock car, and then over time use your levels and points gained with that car to pick upgrades to bring you up to spec for the next race. And that gameplay loop is great. I love the concept, and I can also say that we did get confirmation that you're actually going to start with only lower class and slower car tours unlocked, and then we'll have to work your way up into higher race classes. Great to hear. Starting a sim racing career in GT3 or LMP cars or something is just silly to me. Give me a Honda Fit and let me work my way up. It seems like this Builders Cup is going to be a sort of adaptation of that. But my one worry here is that it seems like these are quite short. I might be misunderstanding the UI, but it looks like from what I can see, each series will only consist of around 6 events, which means that after, let's say, around an hour or two for 6 races, you'll be moving on to another series with likely another car and pretty much starting all over again. I feel like this could make the campaign feel really segmented with no overall through line or end goal. Personally, I would like to see fewer series that are longer, closer to maybe 15 events, where you really do get that time to learn and grow with the car you've chosen. I am a bit worried here that it's just going to feel rushed and your car and upgrade choices won't feel as impactful because they'll only matter for a few races before moving on to something else. Perhaps, though, there will be some good crossover between the different series, and we'll be able to reuse our cars and further upgrade them in another series within the same tour. Moving into the events themselves, each race does have an open practice session, so you won't be thrown into a track and car you aren't familiar with and just asked to win without getting some practice laps in first. And this is actually where they expanded on some pretty neat features. When practicing, the track is broken into individual corners, and you'll be scored based on how fast you took that corner compared to a theoretical best. And you'll also be able to see split times against your previous runs at that corner. You can, by the way, see this stuff contributing to your car points and level in the top right. So every corner you take and how well you take it will affect your car's experience gain and ability to unlock and purchase upgrades. Now, once we get to the racing itself, we see another great new feature. Turn 10 is calling this Challenge the Grid. This lets you manually select your grid position, which in turn increases your potential payout for getting on the podium. Grid position has historically been kind of baked into the default difficulty options, with harder AI settings just pushing you further back the grid. But now we have full control over all of these settings. If you want the AI to be as hard as possible, but still start on pole, you can do that. Or if you want the fun of passing a lot of easier drivers from the back of the pack, that's an option too. And in games like this, more options are always better. So this is a somewhat smaller, but still really key gameplay improvement for the single player racing experience. I'm so glad we aren't doing those ridiculous start from the back of a rolling grid races that we had in GT7. That got tired fast. In the next screen, we see the more familiar difficulty options, which are split into 3 categories: Club, Sport, and Expert. And then we can see 8 AI skill levels we can pick from, and in standard Forza fashion, these settings will all affect your payout. Now, speaking to AI difficulty, as Chris said, the AI Drivatar system has had some big improvements. To start, AI no longer cheats the physics or car stats at all. If they're faster than you, it's because they're driving better than you. No exceptions. This alone is huge, but Chris also says that due to their investment into machine learning, the Drivatars can now be as fast as the fastest real drivers. And again, that's without cheating the physics. If they actually do live up to this claim, this could be massive for single player. And just knowing how the PI system works and how the game calculates things like racing lines, those features could be made much more accurate as well because of these AI improvements. So this was all great news, and again, if executed properly, will make the single player experience much more fun, rewarding, and challenging. Chris also mentioned during the Q&A that you can redo these Builders Cup series, creating a single player that is much more replayable. For example, you could go back into a series with a different car and try to limit yourself to no power upgrades or harder difficulties at the back of the grid, so there's a good deal of freedom, and I think it could lead to some interesting, more unique challenges for players looking for something along the lines of like a Dark Souls SL1 run or some sort of custom speed run. Again, though, for me, like I mentioned earlier, I just worry that the campaign isn't really gonna feel like one campaign. It's more going to feel like just a ton of mini side missions with no through line. And that's something I really miss from games like Gran Turismo 4. I want my career to feel like one persistent racing career. I do, however, think this is a good way to do post-launch content. Chris spoke to this during the Q&A, and I touched on it a bit earlier, but these Builders Cup tours are likely to be the sort of Horizon playlist style content delivery for motorsport, with regular new tours, including new car rewards and tracks, being dropped into the game on a pretty regular basis. And that is just about everything we got from the campaign deep dive. Now, I do want to close with some more info about the simulation and physics side of motorsport, because we did get some good answers there from our private Q&A session. For one, about the effectiveness of slipstreams, Turn 10 has actually made a bit of a realism sacrifice here to make slipstreams more effective in-game, meaning that the range will be longer, the wake will be wider, and the air resistance is dropped a bit more than you actually would see in real life. And on a similar level, they made some tweaks to going off track and then returning to track with dirty tires, where while that is simulated and you will experience some loss of grip and everything, it's all toned down to make for a cleaner and more accessible racing experience. So I think both of these things can really just cement what we already expected from the new motorsport. They're still shooting for a more accessible and kind of entry-level sim, with some minor sacrifices made for the sake of fun and clean racing. That being said, we are still going to see these big physics improvements, like the rebuilt and more accurate tire and suspension models, dynamic track conditions with time of day, weather, and rubbering in or wet and dry lines, and better pit strategy and mechanics with selectable tire compounds and fuel management, where you can choose how much fuel to start the race with and how much to add in the pit. And fuel will affect your car's weight. The one bummer here that we did get some confirmation on is that there still won't be any step adjustment of assists like traction control or ABS. Both of them have been apparently improved, but are still just an on-off versus being able to select, for example, between 3 or 4 different strengths of ABS, which I really would have liked to see. And guys, that is just about everything about motorsport that we've learned over the past few days. Wow, it feels like a lot, and yet there is still so much more I want to know, specifically in the multiplayer department. So of course, stay tuned. I'll be posting updates as they come. It seems like we're now in a phase where information is going to be ramping up quite a bit over the coming months, so I'm excited to see what the future holds. Now, quickly, before you go, if you have any interest in Horizon, they actually teased a bit of the next Horizon 5 update here, Upgrade Heroes. We got a solid confirmation that this is the fabled Part 2 Donut Media update with the high-low cars, and we got a look into one of the new cars coming with the series, Forsberg's new FD Nissan Z, which is a pretty rad pick. So I'll of course be doing a summary of the update when they talk about it in full, but I did want to give you all a heads up about the teases they dropped here today, in case you want to go check out the official coverage. And with that, folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. There was a lot to pack in and talk about here, but let me know what you think so far about all these new motorsport features. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.